Hello, welcome back. Who is here watching live? It'd be great to say hello in the box so I know you're there because I cannot see. It's a bit strange knowing people watching, but I don't know who you are. So if you can say hello and just type in your name perhaps in the box, that would be great. So today is all about self care in relationships. This has been one of my main areas of study, and of course, is part of my day to day work in psychology, in psychotherapy, is exactly what we do is to take care of relationships. But I'm going to focus today on understanding self care in relationships. Hello. Hello. Good morning, Kate. Hello. Lovely to see you guys. And this is an area that is so important. And I feel very passionate about educating myself, educating, hi, Eric, good morning, educating people around what is a healthy relationship, but also what are our responsibilities in relationships. Why is it so important? Because relationships are part of our essence as human beings. We live and we thrive in relationships. We become who we are in relationships, and we also change and evolve as people in relationships. And relationships can also be responsible for a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of distress in our lives. So it's so important that we pay attention and we really take in what is the health of our relationships and how are we in relationships, how are we taking care of ourselves. That's the focus, is our self-care. How can we be in relationship to people or situations that sometimes not as healthy or as helpful as ideally they could be, but how can we manage that? How can we take care of ourselves? That's where I'm gonna go into at the end of the session today. But first of all, I'm going to give an overall explanation about types of relationships, types of abuse, and answering an important question that came from a different live lesson about how can we be in relationship with someone who is very unregulated emotionally, who may be behaving in a way that is quite toxic or quite abusive towards us. How can we be in relationship with those people or in those situations? So I'm going to answer that question at the end. And I'm going to talk about boundaries, because boundaries and relationships are it. They are together. Okay. They are Boundaries are the way we can negotiate how close or how distant we are from other people, or how healthy is the relationship depending on how the boundaries are established. So the boundaries are the things that we can work on to manage relationships, but also to take the best out of relationships or people who are helping us in our lives. So boundaries are like the foundation and are the sort of the structure of relationships. So it's so important. And I wish we learned this as children, right? I had to learn this in my 30s. So about 10 years ago, about 12 years ago, I went through this sort of enlightenment about relationships and about boundaries that I didn't know. So I spent most of my life just trial and error and getting most of the time a lot wrong. Yeah, sometimes things were good, but a lot of times a lot of pain and a lot of ignorance. I had no idea what was going on. So once I learned this, I felt very different about myself. My life has become more manageable. My health is better. So it's so powerful to understand the importance of boundaries in relationships and to identify what's happening in relationships. So I'm going to get into it. So I think I convinced you, or hopefully I have highlighted the need to care for your relationships or to pay attention to them, and also pay attention to yourself in relationships. I hope that I got this across. But I'm just going to make one more point before moving to the next topic, which is in my master's degree, I studied domestic abuse, domestic violence, and the impact it has on people experiencing that. And one thing that was really standing out for me when I was going through these studies was the evidence, okay, that has been established that it affects people's health. This is very, very serious. We know that, but when I went deeper into studying domestic violence and the types of domestic violence between couples mainly, the evidence is so strong of how people's physical and mental health is impacted. So again, this is like an extreme situation, but many of us have had some sort of difficulties in relationships. So it is so important because it affects us directly. We are not separate from our relationships. We cannot isolate ourselves. So again, this is just highlighting why it is so important because it affects our well-being and our health and our quality of life. So I'm going to talk about the different types of relationships and why sometimes we get a bit confused. There's so much information out there. So the first type, and I'm going to draw something here which might help. Um, so we have a type of relationship that is independent. So let's say person A or person B, but I prefer to say me and you because for the purpose of bringing it more alive, I feel that using those pronouns can help. Okay. So let's say me and you, we are in a relationship and we are independent. So let's say we live in the same house or we work together in the same job, but we are independent. So we have this is me and this is you, for example, and we are separate. Okay. We have something in common or we live in the same street, but we are totally independent. We have nothing of our needs mingled together. You do your own thing, I do my own thing, and we are just, for some reason, in the same environment. It could be even in the same family or in the same couple relationship, and people are very independent. They don't really share their needs. Okay. The next type of relationship, and yes, that relationship can be good, it can be neutral because people are doing their own thing. They are not really having a closer relationship. They may be in relationship in a superficial level, but they are not really affecting each other as much because they are totally independent. The next type is the dependent relationship. So let's say one person has needs and the other one is taking care of those needs. So, for example, a parent and a child, and this is going to be so important when we talk about boundaries and managing difficult relationships. So, there are situations where we have someone dependent on us for whatever reason. Maybe they are a child, maybe they are sick, maybe they are unwell, maybe they have a disability, or they're going through something temporarily that they need someone to take care of their needs. So, this is the dependent relationship. So one person has more needs than the other person in the relationship. Okay, so person, let's say me and you. So I am the person who has. Oh, let me see if I can do. I am the person who has less needs, and the person who is depending on me has more needs. So let's say I'm taking care of my son, and he is needy because he has bigger needs because he's only a child, a toddler. So my needs in that relationship are very small. I'm providing for him. He's dependent on me to live his life and grow and thrive. Now, this is very important because this is the same as a codependent relationship. So we talked about independent, two separate people, completely separate. Okay. Then we have the dependent relationship where one person is depending on another. And that could be in many levels: financial, emotional, physical level. It could be a combination of all these. And then we have codependent, which is the same. One person has bigger needs than the other person. Okay. So in the dependent relationship, so let's say I'm taking care of my son and he is a baby or a toddler. My needs in that relationship are very small. I cannot put my needs onto him. He cannot take care of me. But I am an adult, so I'm going to take care of my needs elsewhere. I'm going to have somebody else who takes care of me. But in that relationship with a dependent person, I am the one with less needs. And the same happens in codependent relationships. So codependent relationships, for whatever reason, the other person takes more space in the relationship. So one person has very little space and the other person has very big space. The issue is that is not sometimes a choice. And that sometimes is something that you find yourself in a situation where someone takes a lot of space, and usually it's around emotional needs and emotional sort of unhealthy dynamics. Because in theory, that person could be independent, but they're not. They are taking a lot of space in relationship. What is the problem with that? If you are in a codependent or many codependent relationships and you have your needs very small and you have nowhere else that will take care of your needs, you are suffering. And this is what happens in abusive relationships, that one person is taking a lot of space, a lot of their needs met, and the other person is not. Okay. So, but there is a remedy for that, and I'll talk about it later. But it's different codependent and dependent. Dependent is someone depending on you, and you have a conscious choice or a conscious um, decision to make that commitment to take care of a child, to take care of a sick relative, to take care of someone. But sometimes the codependent and dependent overlap. And there's a lot more about codependency, but let's just keep to the simple understanding that one person's needs are met and the other person's needs are not. So the last type, which is the most beneficial for both parts, is the interdependent relationship. I don't know if people can see properly. So this would be the interdependent relationship. So one person and the other person have equal amount of needs met. And it's like a dance. One day or one time I have my needs met by this person, the next day I do the other way around, and it's a constant movement. And it can go for some time that one person needs more attention or more care than the other, but then it's balanced. So the importance of the interdependent relationship is that both people have their needs met. Both people are thriving and growing and enjoying life and moving forward. In terms of the codependent relationship, one person can benefit, but the other one not so much. The other one can get hurt or neglected, and that's why it's so unhealthy. So we are aiming to build more interdependent relationships because we as human beings, we need each other. We thrive when we have good relationships. And it's not just one, right? We may have many interdependent relationships, and we may have one dependent or even one codependent relationship. So it may be more like a network of relationships that we have, not just one, right? Of course, we have many relationships in our lives. But in terms of self-care, I would like to highlight that we need to be at the center of our focus in relationships and really take time to analyze and to think about the impact and how much are we getting and how much are we giving from each situation. And if we are not in a situation that is healthy or balanced, how can we get our needs met somewhere else so we can cope with the imbalance in that particular area? That's how I see it. Some other psychologists and some other therapists have very different views on this. This is so vast. But I feel that sticking to the basics and sticking to the simple understanding and getting a check-in with yourself from time to time in your relationships can be really helpful and can avoid bigger problems in the future. So if people are having any questions around codependent, dependent, interdependent, these types of things in relationships, this type of dynamics, please send a message there in the chat and I'll try to answer as we are here. But I'm going to move on to some other aspects of relationships, some healthy and unhealthy signs in relationships. So if we imagine that we have two people and we have the relationship as a third entity, a third person, okay? And we can look at the health of that relationship as we would look at a person. So, for example, in an interdependent relationship, that third part is also very strong. So, good communication, people look forward to talking to each other, people want to spend time with each other because it may be interesting, it may be challenging, it may be soothing, you may get something out of it that makes you feel good or something that you need. So the relationship itself is strong. In the other times, the relationship can be very, of course, in a totally independent relationship, the relationship doesn't really exist. Okay, so that's zero, nothing there. In the codependent and dependent relationship, the health of the relationship can also be looked at. Is it something that is somehow benefiting this person who is giving more than actually receiving? Is there some benefit there? Usually there is. Usually there is also an exchange. But the problem is how much? How does it impact the person? So, healthy signs in a relationship. How are we going to measure, okay, the healthy signs of relationships? Is the effect it has on us. That's how we're going to look at. Because we don't know what people are feeling or thinking. We don't know what it's like for them. And we are looking at this third part, this sort of thing that happens in between people, right? So let's say that I can check how this relationship with my friend is going. How do I feel after we talk? How do I feel about meeting this person? Do I feel anxious before we meet? Do I feel flat? Do I feel nothing? Or do I feel excited and do I feel curious about how they're doing? All these signals are signs of the health of your relationship. So, how you feel about someone or how you feel about the relationship are the signs to watch for. And this is going back to our lesson on emotional self-care, really listening to our emotions and taking them seriously. They have something to say to us. So how to identify the unhealthy signs is the opposite, right? It's the opposite. So if a relationship or someone in your life is making you feel anxious, is making you feel resentful or feel sad or feel worried, all these signs are signs that the relationship is not so strong. Something needs to be worked out, something needs to shift, or there is room for improvement, either in the communication or the expectations or the boundaries. Something needs to be worked on because a healthy relationship is one that helps you to feel happier and stronger in yourself and healthier. That's what it is. And an unhealthy relationship is going to drain your physical, your emotional energy, your mental energy, and it can make you feel confused. It make you feel scared, can make you feel depressed, can make you feel exhausted. These are the signs. These are the signs to be taken into account. Okay. So the signs of relationships that are telling us this is not going very well are how it affects us, right? And I'm just going to mention here the different types of abuse in relationship. And I'll probably do a lesson just on that because, again, a very, very huge subject. But just to mention the types of abuse in relationships, which can cause us to feel depressed or scared or drained or anxious or confused. They are the effect of the abusive situation. So physical abuse is quite obvious, right? And if someone hurts you physically and hurts not only you but hurts your possessions, and I'm going to include financial abuse in that too. If person uses your resources, your money or your tools or your computer or your clothes or anything that you own, is a form of abuse without your consent. Person who destroys your things, person who restricts your movement, restricts your access to things, or anything that is to do with the physical body and the physical environment is a form of physical abuse. And It's much more common that we like to think about. But people can use our time, for example, and that's a form of, it can be a form of physical abuse. Someone who, you know, takes too much of our time and we don't notice what's going on until later, saying, wow, I was only planning to, stay with this person for an hour and I spent 5 hours, and now other things I had to do I couldn't do because, I spent all this time with this person. um so yeah, that can be a form of abuse if it happens all the time. So again, this is a very important point I'm going to say. With abuse, it's not a one-off, okay? Yes, it can be a one-off. It can be also an assault, a very violent thing that happens one time, and that's a very serious thing to happen. But more often is the ongoing patterns of abuse in a relationship that are very, very damaging to our health and our well-being. So we're going to move on to emotional abuse. Emotional abuse can be anything that the person says to you that's undermining you as a person, that is making you feel small, making you feel inadequate, making you feel ashamed, making you feel something wrong with you, or making you feel guilty, guilt tripping you. These are signs of emotional abuse. Or manipulation also, that happens very much in codependent relationships. And manipulation, if you do this, I will accept and love you. If you don't do this, you are not a good person and you are letting me down. And this guilt trip and this sort of blaming of the person is emotional abuse. And it's very serious because it's not something as easy to identify as a physical abuse, but it's very, very serious. And it's very important to pay attention and to get help if you've been through something like that, because it can be quite difficult to come out of it by yourself and heal yourself alone in terms of emotional abuse, because it goes very deep. And emotional abuse can also be people name calling and blaming, as like I said, and making the person feel confused, uncertain. And that kind of overlaps with mental abuse as well, psychological abuse, which is invalidating the person's truth, telling them you're overreacting, this is not how you're thinking, you're crazy. Mental and psychological abuse is around the ideas and beliefs and the sense of reality. And somebody can really manipulate that to make you feel like you're not understanding correctly, or that's not what they said. Brainwashing, gaslighting, these terms are out there and people are talking more and more about it, but it's like trying to impose a way of thinking, or trying to say the way you're thinking is not right and their way is the better way, or they got it right. And over time this can be very frightening and can actually make people be mentally unwell, because we, like I was saying in the very beginning, relationships are so fundamental to our life. We create our reality in relationships with people. We don't create that in a vacuum, in a space with nothing. So if somebody is saying that our reality is not true, and we're listening to that a lot, we can lose our sense of reality. It's very, very serious. So we need to pay attention if that's something that we are going through, or someone that we know is going through. There's also spiritual abuse, which is part of, that can happen in a one-to-one situation, but it can happen also in a collective. People can be part of religious organizations or different spiritual groups that can be abusive. And what does that look like? It can look like a little bit like the mental and emotional abuse, that following those rules or following this sort of very rigid way is the only way. So the person can feel they are inadequate, or there's something wrong with them if they don't follow what this spiritual place is telling them to do. It can be very dangerous. And as I said, this can happen in a very large scale. So, and how are we going to know if we're going through an abusive situation or not? It can be difficult to identify by yourself, but remember the thing I said about signs. How are you feeling? How are you feeling when you go to this place? How is your body? How is your emotional self. If I'm going to this particular spiritual practice and I come out feeling exhausted, or I come out feeling scared, or I come out feeling that I am ashamed of an aspect of myself, that's a sign that something about that place or something about what's being said is not quite right for you. So the signs are the very important part of how to guide yourself in relationships. And that's the only way we can know, because what could be right for one person may not be right for another one. So only you know how it's impacting on you. So this is like a very, very wide um, lesson on self-care in relationships. So I start to understand what happens in relationships, what are the danger zones, what are the things to watch out for, and also what to look for, right? What are the things that will help us? So, the people and relationships and environments and groups that help us to be the best of ourselves are the ones that we need to invest more time, because they will nourish us and they will get us to be developing qualities or growing as people. We need more of them. And that's why boundaries are the sort of foundation and the I don't know how to say, the most important part of relationship self-care. Because if you are in a situation, and sometimes we can't help it, it may be someone we're living with, it may be a job that we still need to do until we find a better job, it can be a religious situation where we are still involved in that community and it's not the right time for us to leave a certain place. How can we manage to protect ourselves and have the boundaries as our remedy for those abusive situations? So I think I'm already answering the question that we had before. There's something here. I'm going to read this case, if you don't mind. Abusers know exactly what they are doing. They're not confused. They're not suffering mental health issues. Do I understand this correctly? Yes. And also, they can be experiencing mental health issues themselves, too. And this is very complex, because it's not, abusers can be also victims, or victim is not the right word, but they can be abusive in reaction to their own trauma. So I'm trying to move away from, naming and shaming like abusive victim type of thing, because it's very complex. The abuser probably has experienced abuse in their life to be doing this, possibly, but that doesn't excuse them from what they're causing, right? So that's why self-care is so important, because it's the part that you can control. What they're going through and why they're doing that, we may never have an answer. But most abusers, and as I said, I studied some of it in my master's around domestic violence, and it was a whole year on criminal forensic psychology. And what comes out as evidence is that most criminals, most people who are doing harm to others and to property and to all sorts of situations, they are victims of abuse themselves. There is so much behind how they got to that point. Yes, there are some very, very extreme cases of people who are completely cold. We're talking about psychopathy, perhaps, psychopaths who are really have zero empathy. They are just really calculating and planning their abuse. But most, I would say the vast majority of people who become abusers are also reacting to something they've been through. I hope that helps, because it's not so clear cut. But yeah, abusers can know what they're doing for sure, and they can be manipulative and they can be controlling, but that is because they want their needs met, and they can use that skill, let's say, to get their needs met. That does not mean that, let's not exclude the fact that they are doing that also possibly out of trauma, out of their own suffering. But yes, they know what they're doing, of course, and then that is very different from someone who is doing because they don't know any better. It is very different. So there's lots of shades of gray in between these extremes of people who become abusers because they are planning it and they take even pleasure in causing harm, and people who are doing just as a reaction of not knowing any better because they are also reacting to their own trauma. So I think there was a question around how can we be in relationship when someone is unregulated emotionally, which could be the person is really angry or they are manipulative and controlling and not acting in a very kind way to us. If I understood correctly that the question, um, how can we be in relationship with that person? It depends a lot, and it depends on the principles of the relationships, the quality of the relationships, right? Because if we have someone who is dependent on us, and that could be a child, a sick person, someone we are working with, it could be a sick relative, an elderly relative. If the person is dependent on us, and we have someone who is, being unreasonable, let's call it like that in general terms, it's our job to try to stay calm and try to support them to go through whatever they're going through, not taking it personally and thinking, okay, they are going through a hard time and I'm here to take care of them. And I need to do my thing of stay calm and breathing exercises and grounding, or just thinking, okay, when can I end this situation? Can somebody take over from me? When is this going to end? How can I take care of myself afterwards? So your self-care is fundamental to stay grounded and stay present, and remember that in that situation you're there for them, and there is independent relationship, so the person really needs you. Okay, if the person doesn't depend on you and it's an interdependent relationship, or someone who doesn't have a relationship with you and you're just walking on the road and somebody is being aggressive or unreasonable and abusive, it depends on how much can you walk out. Can you just remove yourself from the situation? Because that's also self-care. It's a boundary, it's a physical boundary, and lots of us do it without thinking, right? We are in a difficult situation, we just go away. We end the relationship, we end the job, we walk away from a fight that's happening on the street. It's our instinct, our protective instinct, to say go away, fight, flight mode, right? So you will know that sometimes it's right to confront the person, sometimes it's right to flight, to move away, to run away and remove yourself physically from that situation. And sometimes you can't, like I was saying, if you're a dependent person, or if it's someone you have an interdependent relationship but is going through something hard, all you can do is to take care of yourself and take care of your boundaries as much as possible in that situation. Say, okay, I can see that I'm going to manage for another 5 minutes or so, and then I need to take a break. I need to remove myself. I need to take a breather. Maybe you can say this to the person, and depending on how the situation is, and say, look, I hear what you're saying. You've got all these things to say, and you're really angry, or you're really anxious, or whatever's going on. I just need a little break because I need to be here for you. I want to be here for you, but I need to take care of myself. You may not say these words. You may say, look, I hear what you're saying, validate them. Say, yes, I can hear, I can see how distressed you are. I just need to go 5 minutes there, I'll be back. So usually that can help. So it's very important that you keep the context in mind. Do I need to engage with this person? Can I remove myself? All these things. So it's very complex, isn't it? It takes a lot of thinking if we are thinking about it. But a lot of it we do on autopilot. We just do what we learned. Sometimes that works, but sometimes we need to review and see if that is still working for us. I hope that helps to clarify a little bit. But if you have any more questions around that, we can talk more. If there is a specific example, I can talk more if it's a specific one, because it varies. Like I said, the context. Who is the person who is being unregulated? Is someone I have a responsibility with, or can I just let it go? And also, as I said, boundaries, right? So we can have the physical boundary of removing ourselves from a situation, but sometimes we can't. So what we can do is to have a mental boundary or psychological boundary. And these were when I learned this, it was such a such a revelation. And I thought, why did I not learn this before? I spent 5 years studying psychology in Brazil, and I never learned this. And I have my theories why I didn't learn this before. But anyway, this is for another live. And so we can have a psychological boundary. And when I was saying about self-care and about checking how you're doing in your body, checking if you need a break, checking if you need to have a little bit of food, a little bit of water, all the things that bring you back to your body and say, yes, I can see it's becoming too much for me. I'm getting tired. I didn't have any lunch. This is going on for longer than I expected, or I'm thirsty, or I didn't sleep very well, so I am tired. I can see that I'm not doing my best here. This self-scanning of your body and your physical state is a psychological boundary. Okay, this can happen as you are in the situation, because if you are not aware of what you need or what's going on with you, you can be reactive and can make the situation worse. So the psychological boundary is one aspect of psychological boundary is to scan yourself and check how are you doing? What do you need? And most times we need a little break if it's a situation that's very intense. And that includes caring for someone, caring for children, caring for clients at work. We need to keep looking after ourselves, keep looking and checking in with ourselves. What do I need? And sometimes we haven't learned that. I didn't learn, as I said, until I was 30 something. So it took me a long time and I'm still learning. But that is really what makes a difference in terms of self-care in relationships, is caring for yourself and being responsible for your needs. So these are the topics I had for today. I could spend days talking about this, and I will definitely come back and do more specific lessons if people like. So it'd be really good to hear from you. What did you think? And if you have any questions and what you need help with, and I'll be trying to tailor the sessions for you. It's been really good to have people live and saying hello. It's really lovely. And I hope to see you next week. We're going to talk about spiritual self-care, which is something that is quite a taboo nowadays, but is very, very important. So I look forward to continuing. Take care, everyone.